When you think about naval power, your mind probably goes straight to the hardware that makes for great cinema.
Oh, absolutely.
Right. Like you picture a 100,000-ton aircraft carrier launching stealth fighters off the deck, or submarines just gliding silently in the deep, or guided missile destroyers cutting through the waves.
Yeah, the really highly visible stuff.
Exactly. The stuff that dominates the news feeds and our collective imagination. They are the ultimate visible symbols of national strength. But what if I told you that the most important ship in any modern navy isn't the one loaded with the most hypersonic missiles?
It's really counterintuitive.
It is. The ship that actually dictates who controls the world's oceans is the one carrying the groceries. So in this deep dive, we are pulling apart some fascinating research from a piece called Strategic Vanguard to explore the invisible lifeline of naval power, which is a military replenishment at sea.
It is a critical topic, and honestly, it completely reframes how we should look at global conflict. Because there's a very old doctrine in military strategy, weapons win battles, but logistics sustain wars.
Right.
We tend to focus entirely on the sharp end of the spear, the combat vessels. But that spear is entirely useless without this specialized, largely unglamorous fleet working behind the scenes.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the way I look at it, modern naval warfare is essentially like a high-stakes Formula One race.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Yeah, like we all obsess over the aerodynamics of the multi-million-dollar car.
Yeah.
We look at the tires, the engine specs, the driver's reflexes, but we completely ignore the pit crew.
Right.
And if that pit crew doesn't execute perfectly, that incredible cutting-edge car is just going to run out of gas and sit dead on the track.
Right.
So today, we're focusing on the ocean's ultimate pit crew.
Yeah, and if we connect that analogy to the broader picture, we aren't just looking at the mechanics of changing tires. We are going to explore why these maritime pit crews dictate the geopolitical balance of the entire globe. I mean, the engineering required to pull this off is staggering, but the strategic implications are what actually shape the borders of our world.
Right, but before we get into the geopolitical chessboard, I actually need to push back on something in the source material.
Okay, sure.
Because I'm looking at these notes on the unrelenting appetite of a naval fleet, and I have an immediate question. Don't we have nuclear-powered aircraft carriers now?
Yes, we do.
Right, and those reactors can run for like 20 years without needing new fuel. So why are they on this ticking clock the source describes? If the ship powers itself, why does it need a continuous logistical lifeline at all?
That is a very common misconception, actually, and it gets to the heart of the task force concept. You are entirely correct that a Nimitz or Ford-class carrier runs on nuclear power. Its propulsion is, theoretically anyway, limitless.
Right.
But an aircraft carrier never deploys alone, and it doesn't fight with its reactor, it fights with its air wing.
Ah. Okay.
And every single time an F-35 fighter jet launches off that deck, it burns an immense volume of JP-5 aviation fuel.
Right, they aren't nuclear planes.
Exactly. The carrier doesn't manufacture jet fuel, it just stores it. Furthermore, the carrier is surrounded by a strike group, cruisers, destroyers, frigates, that provide air defense and anti-submarine screening.
And they aren't nuclear either.
No, they're not. Those escort ships are predominantly powered by gas turbine engines, and they burn marine diesel at an astonishing rate, especially when they have to sprint at high speeds to intercept a threat.
Okay, so the carrier might be nuclear, but literally everything around it and on top of it runs on conventional fuel.
Precisely that. And we haven't even factored in the human element yet.
Oh, right, the crew.
Yeah, a carrier strike group contains anywhere from 5,000 to 8,000 sailors and aviators.
That is a small city.
It is. That means serving upward of 20,000 meals every single day. Then you have the mechanical reality of operating in a highly corrosive saltwater environment. Things break constantly. You need a continuous stream of electronic components, replacement radar parts, industrial lubricants, fresh water. So the moment that strike group leaves its home port, its capability begins to degrade.
So even a multi-billion-dollar, technologically unmatched fleet is essentially on a ticking clock.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how absolute that clock is. If a Navy cannot bridge that supply gap, the entire task force becomes paralyzed.
You just have to stop.
Pretty much. The admiral in charge would be forced to abandon the operational theater, turn the ships around, and head back to a friendly harbor. The second a heavily armed destroyer leaves its patrol sector just to go get diesel and food, its strategic value drops to zero.
Because it's not there anymore.
Right. It ceases to project power. It is just commuting.
Which means the only way to keep the fleet in the fight is to bring the port to the fleet. And the mechanics of how they actually accomplish this, what the Navy calls replenishment at sea, or RAS, is honestly one of the wildest engineering feats I've ever read about.
Underway replenishment is really the ultimate test of seamanship. It requires an extraordinary suspension of normal maritime safety rules.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I was trying to conceptualize this while reading Strategic Vanguard. Imagine trying to pass a full cup of hot coffee between two cars driving down the highway at 50 miles an hour.
Sounds impossible, right?
Right. But now, imagine the highway is moving up and down unpredictably, the cars weigh tens of thousands of tons, and the coffee you are passing is actually high-explosive missiles and jet fuel.
Yeah, it's intense.
And they don't park. They do all of this while moving.
And the physics of doing that are incredibly hostile. When you take a frontline warship and bring it alongside a massive fleet support ship out in the open ocean, they are usually traveling at about 12 to 15 knots.
Yeah.
And they get within roughly 150 feet of each other. At that proximity, hydrodynamics takes over.
Wait, you mean the water between the ships starts acting strangely?
Yes. It's called the Venturi effect. As these two colossal steel holes displace the ocean, the water gets compressed in the narrow channel between them.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Yeah, to get through that bottleneck, the water has to accelerate, which creates a low pressure zone. So the ocean is literally trying to suck the two ships together into a collision.
That is terrifying.
It really is. The helmsmen on both vessels have to continuously actively steer away from each other just to maintain parallel courses.
So they are fighting the laws of physics just to drive straight. But what about the connection itself? Like, if you shoot a cable across, you hook up a massive fuel hose, what happens when a rogue wave lifts the supply ship up, but drops the destroyer down into a trough?
That's a great question.
Wouldn't that sudden distance just snap the cables and dump thousands of gallons of marine diesel into the sea?
That would happen almost immediately if the cables were static. But the engineering solution to this is brilliant. They use auto-tensioning span wire rigs.
Auto-tension.
Yeah, these are advanced hydraulic or pneumatic winches on the supply ship. They are designed to sense the exact tension on the wire. So as the two ships roll independently on the ocean swells, the winch instantly spools out more cable when they push apart and violently reels it back in when they roll together.
Oh, wow. So it adapts in real time.
Exactly. It maintains a constant, precise tension so the fuel hoses stay suspended safely above the water, regardless of the sea state.
And while this high-pressure fuel transfer is happening, the source notes they're also doing vertical replenishment.
Yes, VERTREP.
But it involves helicopters, right?
Yeah. Helicopters are constantly lifting off the deck of the supply ship, carrying heavy pallets of ammunition, replacement jet engines, dry stores, ferrying them over to the carrier and dropping them on the flight deck.
It's like a highly choreographed ballet.
It really is. But one steering casualty on the bridge, one parted tension wire, and you have a catastrophic emergency involving highly flammable materials directly alongside a warship.
Mastering this terrifying maritime ballet isn't just a neat trick for the crew to show off, though. The research makes a compelling argument that this mechanical capability is the literal dividing line between a regional defense force and a true global superpower.
Yeah, if we connect this to the bigger picture, a blue water navy, a navy that can operate globally, is fundamentally defined by its endurance.
Right.
Theoretical firepower is completely irrelevant if you cannot physically put that firepower into the theater of operations and keep it there. The United States Navy essentially wrote the book on this over the last century.
Yeah, the source holds up the U.S. Navy's combat logistics force as the gold standard.
Right. They possess a fleet of specialized oilers, dry cargo ships, and fast combat support vessels that accompany their strike groups everywhere. It provides Washington with a strategic flexibility that is just unmatched.
So they don't have to go back to port.
Exactly. The U.S. can park a heavily armed carrier strike group off any coastline on Earth and keep it there continuously for months without ever needing permission to dock at a foreign port. And the Royal Navy in the UK operates on a very similar philosophy, utilizing the Royal Fleet Auxiliary to maintain their global reach.
But the global landscape is shifting rapidly, right? Because Strategic Vanguard spends a significant amount of time detailing the ambitions of China's People's Liberation Army Navy, the plan.
Yes, a very significant shift.
We're always hearing headlines about China launching new aircraft carriers or building advanced guided missile destroyers at a record pace. But the source argues the real story is their logistics.
Because Beijing recognizes that to transition from a coastal defense force to a genuine blue water navy, their logistical tether has to stretch exponentially.
Right.
The PLM has heavily invested in ships like the Type 901 Fast Combat Support Vessel. These are enormous, sophisticated ships specifically designed to keep pace with their new carrier strike groups.
So what does this all mean? Should you and I be looking at satellite photos of their supply ships rather than counting their stealth fighters to measure their true global reach?
Without a doubt, combat vessels demonstrate intent, but logistics vessels demonstrate reality.
Well, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, and China's not only building the ships, they are establishing overseas logistics hubs, like their base in Djibouti, to resupply the vessels that resupply the fleet. It is a layered infrastructure of endurance.
And China's expansion brings us to India, which the source also highlights. As China pushes further into the Indian Ocean region, India's maritime ambitions are expanding in response.
Right, they have to respond.
They are running security patrols, conducting anti-piracy missions, and projecting their own power across a vast stretch of ocean.
And India's geography places it at the center of the world's most critical shipping lanes. To police that region, they rely on fleet support vessels like the INS Deepak and the INS Shakti.
Okay.
These ships are constantly out there transferring fuel and operational stores to Indian naval task forces far from their domestic ports. And because India operates aircraft carriers of their own, they are actively developing a new class of fleet support ships to sustain those battle groups into the future.
So everybody's realizing how important this is.
They understand that whoever commands the logistics commands the ocean.
Which brings up a fascinating paradox. If these supply vessels are the actual metric of a Navy's global reach, they must be the ultimate prize in a conflict.
Absolutely.
I mean, they are the fleet's most valuable asset, but that inherently makes them its most exposed vulnerability.
This raises an important question about modern targeting strategy. If you are an adversary facing a modern carrier strike group, the absolute hardest tactical problem you can try to solve is attacking the combatants directly.
Right. You don't want to attack the destroyer.
No. Destroyers and cruisers are floating fortresses. They are equipped with layered air defense networks, anti-submarine helicopters, advanced radar tracking designed specifically to destroy anything that comes near them.
So you don't attack the fortress. You attack its supply lines. It's not a Band-Aid. It's an exposed artery stretching thousands of miles across the ocean.
That is the exact strategic vulnerability. If you can sink or disable the replenishment ships, you effectively neutralize the entire carrier strike group without ever having to fire a single missile at the aircraft carrier itself.
Because they just run out of gas.
The warships will simply run out of fuel and missiles and be forced to retreat. Because these logistics ships are relatively slow, lightly armed, and absolutely vital, they require a heavy defensive umbrella.
The source calls this the escort tax.
Yes. A naval commander has to dedicate highly capable, expensive combat ships, peeling them away from offensive operations just to babysit the supply chain.
Wow, that's a huge trade-off.
It is. You need anti-submarine frigates and air defense destroyers forming a protective bubble around the oilers. The logistics sustain the fleet, but the fleet has to protect the logistics.
But then, when there is no war, that exact same logistical capability flips into a completely different role. The exposed artery becomes a lifeline for civilians.
The peacetime application of these vessels is profound. Just think about the immediate aftermath of a massive natural disaster, like a catastrophic tsunami, a severe cyclone, or a major earthquake.
Usually the coastal infrastructure is completely wiped out in those situations. You can't fly cargo planes into ruined runways, and you can't dock normal container ships because the ports are destroyed or just choked with debris.
Exactly. But fleet support ships do not need a port. That is their fundamental design advantage. A navy can position these massive vessels just offshore of a devastated region.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah, and instead of bombs and jet fuel, their holds are loaded with emergency rations, bottled water, and heavy engineering equipment.
And they can use the exact same underway replenishment helicopters to bypass the ruined ports and fly supplies directly inland to the survivors.
Furthermore, these ships often have extensive medical facilities, desalination plants that can pump thousands of gallons of fresh drinking water directly to the shore, and the ability to serve as a floating command center for international relief efforts.
That's incredible.
It demonstrates how naval logistics is not purely an instrument of war. It is a highly effective tool of international diplomacy and humanitarian aid.
It really shifts your perspective on what power actually looks like. So to recap our journey through the research today, for you listening, We started by looking at the terrifying math of keeping a floating industrial complex alive on the open ocean.
Right.
We explored the physics-defying ballet of replenishment at sea, fighting the Venturi effect to transfer high explosives and jet fuel between moving vessels. We learned that these unglamorous cargo haulers are the true benchmark of blue water capability,
Right.
driving the geopolitical strategies of the US, China, and India.
The real game changers.
Yeah, and we saw how they exist as a paradox, the ultimate wartime target and the ultimate peacetime hero, the Achilles heel that also happens to be a giant floating Band-Aid. So next time you see a dramatic photo of an aircraft carrier dominating the seas, look closely at the edges of the frame. Because somewhere nearby, there is an invisible logistics vessel making that entire deployment possible.
The underlying truth of military history remains remarkably stubborn. Logistics sustains strategy. Now, Strategic Vanguard does note that the future of this space is rapidly evolving.
Oh, definitely.
Navies are currently exploring increased automation, artificial intelligence systems to manage complex, predictive supply chains, digital inventory tracking across global networks, and even the development of fully autonomous resupply vessels.
Wow, robot supply ships.
Basically, yeah. The technology will inevitably get faster and smarter, but the core principle of maritime physics won't change. Physical goods, whether it's marine diesel, advanced interceptor missiles, or rice, must still physically cross the harsh, unforgiving environment of the ocean to reach the people and machines that depend on them.
And that actually brings me to a final thought I want to leave you with today. The source mentions AI and autonomous resupply as the inevitable future. But think about the logical extreme of that. If global naval power currently relies entirely on the physical tether of these highly vulnerable supply ships carrying food and fuel,
Right.
what happens when warfare becomes fully autonomous?
That's a huge question.
Will the navies of the 22nd century even have human crews that need 20,000 meals a day? Or will the very concept of the invisible lifeline shift entirely, moving away from slow ships carrying diesel and bread to satellite networks beaming energy and targeting data across the ocean to unmanned fleets?
It completely changes the paradigm.
Exactly. If the machines don't need groceries, who truly controls the blue water? It's something to mull over. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep learning and stay curious.
Thank you for joining us on this Strategic Vanguard podcast. If you found value in this analysis, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. We bring you fresh podcasts every Monday here on YouTube and Rumble, and you can also catch the audio versions on Spotify and Amazon Music. Just search for Strategic Vanguard Podcast. For more insights, articles, and discussions, subscribe to our blog at strategicvanguard.com. Your support helps us grow and bring you more in-depth analysis on defense, geopolitics, and strategy. Until next time, stay informed, stay strategic.